in Montana. And so they also emerge a little bit later than some of the weeds we might be used to. They emerge when the soils are warm, probably a little later than kochia, but we don't really have any data on this. They have a long emergence window that begins probably in May and then is going to continue into July and even August if there's ample soil moisture. These weeds can be found in irrigated fields, and so if you have heat and moisture there, they're likely to germinate if they're present. They produce hundreds of thousands of seeds per plant. Palmer amaranth especially can get really, really large in the southeastern United States. And there's a lot of herbicide resistance, but Lovreet's going to cover that in more detail as we go on. So now let's come back to the taxonomy and orient ourselves a little bit about these species, the family they're in, and then we'll step through some characteristics and how we identify them. So when we head out into the field, we can really try to identify the pigweeds, the Amaranthus species that we see. So they belong to the plant family Amaranthaceae, which is the pigweed family or the amaranth family. So the family's been redrawn by plant systematics people in the recent years with more molecular evidence. And really now the Chenopodiaceae, or the sort of chenopode goosefoot family, belongs within the amaranth family. And now the Amaranthaceae, the amaranth family, includes about 60 genera, and there's a total of 363 species within that family. So the family includes many important crops and weed species that we're pretty familiar with. The picture here, this is Amaranthus cardatus. It's an ornamental plant that they actually sell in garden shops. You can see it as that really typical looking amaranth kind of leaf and a long axial florets. People like it because it's obviously the purple is a nice color, and it makes for a good plant. So the family also includes many crop and weed species. And in addition, so quinoa, for example, the grain we eat, that actually belongs to the genus Chenopodium. The species is Chenopodium quinoa. And it's a plant that we consider that may be a potential niche crop in Montana. We've done quinoa trials in Montana. The photo is a picture out of a 2017 article from the Prairie Star in Montana. So we have these species as both weeds, ornamental plants, but we have them as weeds too. So common lamb's quarters belongs to this family. It's now the Amaranthaceae. And the species Chenopodium albums, common lamb's quarter. And I'll step through a little bit how to separate out these genera when we move into discussing the identification. Also in the Amaranthaceae are our two constant weed companions in Montana and most of our cropping systems. That's kochia and Russian thistle. So these species are also part of the Amaranthaceae in the family. Different genera then, but same family. So we also have members of the family that are native to Montana and are good range plants that we want out there. So winter fat, if you're walking range country and we're thinking about it, Krasninakovia lanata is winter fat. It's also in this Amaranthaceae family. And so they all have similar floral makeup and floral characteristics. So let's talk about separating these species a little bit. I'm a plant taxonomy nerd. I really like to think about plant taxonomy and botany. And so I go through keys quite often and I think about it. So if we've started at the family level and now we're thinking about, well, we have these common genera that we want to separate in Montana. We walk out into a field and we see something we think is in the Amaranthaceae, but we're not really sure what it is. So now let's work through it. So separating Chenopodium from Amaranthus. So Chenopodium on the left there, it doesn't really have any spiny bracts around its florets. It's around its flowers. But the photo on the right side, that is Amaranthus retroreflexus, or redroot pigweed. And you can see how it's more spiny around the flowers. The flowers are a little bit more set in there, and they're guarded from each other. So we separate those two species based on the two genera based on the bracts. So when we move further into Amaranthus, they all tend to have sort of bracts that surround the flowers. So Amaranthus, in Montana, we have 8 species in the genus. There's about 75 species in the genus globally. And some of the species are really difficult to distinguish from each other. And that's partially why we're here talking about it today, so that we can get better at distinguishing the species, so we can really find those water hemp plants, find those Palmer amaranth plants when we're out looking in our fields. So we'll start with the easy ones, and we'll pull out some of the easy ones in here. So it's not Palmer amaranth or water hemp if the plant is growing prostrate. So this is a common weed we see on the edges of ag fields, waste areas in Montana. That's Amaranthus splitoides, or prostrate pigweed. It's growing flat on the ground, that's prostrate. And so if you see that and you're like, that's a pigweed, it's not likely a Palmer amaranth or water hemp, it's Amaranthus splitoides, or prostrate pigweed. It's not Palmer amaranth or water hemp if the plant is a tumble pigweed with flowers pretty much isolated to the axils and no terminary floret. And I'll come back to that a little bit. The picture on the left shows the flowers in the leaf axil, so between the stem and the leaf, in Amaranthus albus, which is tumble pigweed. So tumble pigweed shows up in our ag fields, railroad tracks, waste areas in Montana. It's fairly common. The picture on the right side there are both tumble pigweeds. One is already broken off and laying upside down. The other one is still attached to the to its root system and is held on the ground there, but it's turned brown and it's probably ready to disperse across the field. So if it's a tumble pigweed, it's not water hemp or Palmer amaranth. So of the group of 75 species globally, a group of 10 species from North America are dioecious, and that includes Palmer amaranth and water hemp. And dioecious means of 2 different houses. So there are separate male plants and there's separate female plants, which means they have to share pollen and outcross with each other to make a flower, to make a seed. And that diversity leads to a lot of resistance. I'll let Lovreet talk about the resistance. So like hemp, the plant hemp, not at all related to water hemp, completely different family. Hemp, Cannabis sativa, is also a dioecious plant, and it has a separate male plants and a separate female plant. So if you've been growing hemp or thinking about it lately, you've been thinking about how to rogue out all the male plants to produce maybe the CBD quality flowers that you want to have. So in Montana, the only 2 dioecious species we're going to have, the separate male and female plants in the genus Amaranthus, are Palmer amaranth and water hemp. Those are the only 2 that are going to be dioecious in Montana. And so we can think about how we separate those out. So the 2 most common monoecious, or having both male and female flowers on the same plant, is redroot pigweed, that's Amaranthus retroreflexus, and Amaranthus hybridus, which is called slim amaranth. And we're separating those from water hemp and Palmer amaranth, which have separate male and female plants. So how do we do that? It can be really difficult. In the last year and a half or so, I've spent a lot of time going around Montana looking at all the pigweeds that I can find. And this is sort of the way I step through a lot of these characteristics when I try to identify them. So Palmer amaranth and water hemp, they tend to have smooth stems with no hairs on them. So the picture on the left, the little hairs on the stem, or the pubescence there, that's redroot pigweed stems. And pretty much all the red root pigweed I pull out and look at, they have fuzzy stems. Palmer amaranth and water hemp, that's Palmer amaranth photos on the right side. They have a very smooth, glabrous stem. You're not going to see any little hairs on them. Leaf traits. So I bring up leaf traits. It's not always a great identification characteristic, but in agriculture, we're often looking to manage small weeds because that's when herbicides tend to work, or when tillage tends to work, or our management intervention. So when we think of looking at the leaves, Palmer amaranth has longer petioles. I put that yellow or that orange arrow on the right side over there. That's a Palmer amaranth plant. It's actually the same one from the previous slide. And you can see that leaf stem or that petiole is really long in this case. It's longer than the leaf itself. That's a good identifying characteristic for Palmer amaranth. Water hemps don't necessarily tend to be so long, and I'll show that in the next slide. But on the left in the red root pigweed, you see that those petioles are much shorter in nature compared to those of Palmer amaranth. So we can continue on leaf traits a little bit. Palmer amaranth and water hemp have longer leaves, and they're less short and squat compared to the red root pigweed leaves. So you can see they're kind of egg-shaped, the Palmer on the right side, but it's a much more long, elongated leaf compared to maybe the more shorter and rounder, more egg-shaped or circular-shaped red root pigweed. So water hemp on the left also has a much narrower or lance-shaped leaf, so lanceolate leaf, like a lance, the type of sword. It's wide in the middle, but it's smaller on both of the ends. And that's the water hemp on the left of the group of 4 pictures. And then you see Palmer amaranth on the right, where someone has folded back that leaf petiole, and you can see that that leaf stem is actually longer than the leaf. The red root pigweed, it's more elliptical in nature when you see the smaller, younger plants. So really the most defining characteristics when we look at the two here are these 2 photos, and identifying water hemp and Palmer from red root pigweed, is that water hemp and Palmer amaranth have much longer, narrow terminal inflorescence, so on the end of the stem. So in the picture on the left side, you can see the longer, more elongated nature of that inflorescence. And then the plant on the right side, which was co-occurring in the same sugar beet field, has a much narrower or a much shorter inflorescence. It's maybe shorter and squatter would be how I would characterize it when I'm out looking for the 2 species. There is going to be a quiz on this, by the way. So water hemp, here's a good image. This is from a Durham field. You can see we have a long elongated inflorescence in this case. It's much different looking than, say, red root pigweed in this context. Palmer amaranth, this is the picture of a male inflorescence in Palmer amaranth. You see that long, skinny inflorescence. And because it's the male, it's a little bit softer to the touch because the spiny bracts aren't as sharp on the male plants compared to the female plants. You can also see that long petiole fairly well in this picture. So monoecious versus dioecious. So when we're thinking about it in the field and we're going and we're looking at plants, red root pigweed has male and female flowers on the same plant. So that means every mature plant that you pull out, you should basically be able to get some small black seeds to come out on it. Water hemp and Palmer amaranth, on contrast, have separate male and female plants. Females are spinier, males are often softer to the touch, and not every plant is going to make seeds. So if you have one of those softer male plants, you can look for the male parts in the flower, and you would see that there wouldn't be any seed that would come out of it even when it was mature in the field. So the last tricky pigweed I'm going to throw in here, and then we're going to have a quiz. So Amaranthus hybridus, it's a monoecious pigweed. So all these plants are going to make seeds. The common name is slim pigweed. So because maybe compared to red root pigweed, it has a longer, slimmer terminal inflorescence. And when I've looked across at pigweeds across the state the last year and a half or so, pulling over on the side of the road, looking at pigweeds, and surprisingly enough, Amaranthus hybridus or slim pigweed is actually quite a bit more common than I expected it to be. And I actually helped Matt Lavin identify it, which was a proud moment for me. So with that, we're gonna start our quiz, and I'm just gonna run through the poll questions and see how well we can identify some of these pigweeds from photographs. And I know it can be really difficult. So Jane, are you ready for the first polling question? And I'll put up the first picture.
I am ready.
Okay, so what amaranth species is this? Remember that growth form when we're thinking about it.
All right, they're fast on the draw today.
Are they?
I'm going to go ahead and close it.
You can close it
And
up.
then-
So the first one was, yep, prostate pigweed. Everyone got 66% of the people got that one. So that's good. So that's one of the easier pigweeds to define. It's that prostrate growth habit. It's out there on your field edges, and be looking for it when you're out there. Okay, Jane, are we ready for the next question to pop up?
Ready.
Okay, let me go click again. Okay, what species is this? So here you go. You're walking out into the field, you're looking at it, and you're thinking, what species of pigweed is this? And the photo on the left should help us identify the species. Has really short, squat inflorescences is what I would say of this example.
This one's a little tougher. People are taking a little more time to answer. Which I would agree, it's a little harder than the last one. Okay, poll closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, yeah, people did pretty good. So correct answer was C, red root pigweed. And so this is Amaranthus retroflexus. So we have some short, squat inflorescences there, as I'll call them. And then when we look at that stem, we can see that fuzzy little stem, which is a good way to really separate red root out from Palmer amaranth and water hemp. Okay, one final question on the quiz today. Jane, if you're ready to bring up the next question, I'll bring up the next photograph.
I'm ready, Tim.
Okay, here we go. What species is this? And by that, I don't mean the sugar beets in the background, nor do I mean the green foxtail in the foreground. This is the hardest question of them all, really.
Poll closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ooh, this one was a bit tougher. And that brings me right to my next slide. So that was actually water hemp, Amaranthus tuberculatus, that was in a field. I could see how many people would answer slim amaranth in this case, and it's really difficult to tell. And so if I were going to have this sample physically in my hand, I would probably walk around and look at the field and look at the different pigweeds and see if I could see different male plants or different female plants in there, and then maybe jump into think about a key. But really, when in doubt on pigweed identification, I think it's really important to get positive identification for prevention strategies. And so contact your Montana State University Extension agent or your ag professional. And we really want to hear about all these potential cases of either water hemp or Palmer amaranth in the state. We can help get positive identification. And then there's also some genetic testing that can be available for seed or other things that show up. So with that, I'm going to turn over my portion. I'm going to end my portion and turn it over to Lovreet. And I'll just let him talk a little bit more about these two species and their biology and problems. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you, Tim. While we're switching presenters, please go ahead in the chat box and type in your name and license number if you're hoping to get a applicator credit for this. And we'll do that while we switch over. Lovreet, I'm going to make you a presenter, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm waiting for, I got it.
All right.
Okay.
So everybody remember to, well, everyone who wants a credit, go ahead and type your name and license number in the chat box. And it's the floor is yours, Lovreet.
I think you can see my screen, I guess, and
yes, we can.
Awesome. So thank you all, and I think Tim did a great job of separating out these species. It was very informative, and I think that'll help anybody who's listening to this presentation to separate those species out. I'm going to focus more on the Palmer amaranth and water hemp. That's our topic for today. I do see that you probably have a better understanding of how they look like now, but I want to talk about the distribution and management of Palmer amaranth and water hemp if it is there in your fields or if it's not. Okay, so in this graph, we're going to look at the movement of Palmer amaranth across the United States over the years. So if you, as you can see in this graph, that sorry, not the graph, it's a figure. So in this map, we can see that it's native to the southern United States, in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California. And during early 1915s to 2000, it started moving towards the southeast, and most of that area has been, infested with Palmer. During 2001 to 2012, it started moving towards the north and in the Midwest region, and it kind of covered the most of that region. And in the last decade or so, it has been moving further north and also towards our neighboring states. And we can see that we currently have Palmer in our neighboring states like North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. And that's how it has been historically. And now we are concerned that, we may get it over here as well. And I want to shed some light on why it's really problematic and what's going on. So I'm pretty sure you can't really read anything over here. So it's a global herbicide-resistant Palmer amaranth database, actually. First 6 entries are from outside of US, but all the rest of the entries are from US, from different states. And there are a lot of cases which have been reported in which Palmer amaranth has been resistant to multiple groups of herbicides. And definitely the outcrossing nature, the dioecious nature of this species has helped this to evolve resistance to so many different groups of herbicides. So wherever the palmer is present, we are continuously developing those multiple resistances, and we are losing those effective herbicides to control this weed in those situations. So we really don't want to have this weed over here. Talking about waterhemp, it's also another pigweed which is really problematic across the United States. As compared to palmer amaranth, waterhemp is not that much distributed across the US. As you can see in this graph, especially the herbicide-resistant waterhemp, it's more towards the south. It's not more to I don't see any waterhemp on the East Coast when I was working there, and in this graph as well, and there is not much towards the west. But what we can see in this map is that most of the populations they are definitely resistant to at least glyphosate. And especially in the Midwest, the multiple resistance cases have been increasing over time. So that's the kind of distribution for waterhemp, and we have waterhemp in North Dakota and South Dakota now. So digging more into some of these multiple resistance cases, these are two papers published actually these populations are from Midwest. One is from Kansas and other is from Missouri, on which I worked at when I was there. And these both waterhemp and palmer, they have evolved 6-way resistance in these populations. So basically, most of the effective herbicides, we can't really control them in those cases. The interesting part of these two populations is that they have evolved resistance. They have a metabolic resistance mechanisms. So the metabolic resistance mechanism actually help this species to metabolize the herbicides with the same pathway, and they can metabolize herbicides from different groups. And part of the reason that they could evolve resistance to so many groups is its cross-pollination nature, its dioecious nature. So that's how it has, and it also produces a lot of seed. It can produce 500,000 seed without any competition. So that prolific nature and its outcrossing nature has helped to this weed to evolve resistance to so many groups of herbicides. I want to dig a little bit more into these populations. So this is the palmer from Kansas. What I want you to see is that these are mostly the herbicides which are used in corn and soybean, because they are the predominant crops grown in that region. But if you can see, most of the herbicides, the group 2s, chlorosulfuron, group 4s, 2,4-D, atrazine, glyphosate, not glufosinate and paraquat, but lactoferrin, that's a PPO, and HPPD, mesotran. So they're all resistant to them. And you can see in those pictures that even if you go from left to right, that's how the rates are increasing. But even at the higher rates, we see that this population has survived. So that's really problematic situation for a grower who has this kind of population, because they can't really use these herbicides anymore. And these populations, the individual plants actually can have multiple resistances. So this is an example from Missouri, from the population on which I worked. It was resistant to 6 different groups of herbicides. Mostly this region grows corn and soybeans. But it was interesting to see in this population that the field was under soybeans most of the time. So it was soybean after soybean after soybean. The farmers over there, they really love soybeans. But if you see the group 27, that's a corn herbicide. So how did this population end up being resistant to mesotrione? But if you look at the surroundings for this farm, there is a lot of corn grown over there. So it's possible that the genes were transferred through pollen. And this is like an example for the dioecious nature or the cross-pollination pollinating nature of this species, that you may not select it with the herbicide, but it may get it from somewhere else. So that's why it's really problematic. And if you look at this graph, what I want to point out over here is that 40% of the individual Waterhemp plants which were screened, they had greater than 5-year resistance. So, you might think that, okay, there is a population, it may be like some plants will be resistant to this and others will be resistant to that. But around 40% of this individuals they were resistant to 5 different groups of herbicides. So this again comes to their, cross-pollinating nature, their prolific seed production that helps them to, evolve resistance at such a rapid rate. Well, so I do have a question over here. So have you seen Palmer or Waterhemp in Montana? Before I start digging into, I just want to have your, opinion on that. Jane, if you can send out the question.
Yep, it's up and running, Lovreet.
Awesome.
We'll give it about 15 more seconds.
Yeah. I hope nobody has seen it.
Well, I am seeing it. I don't know if you can see the results coming in, but it looks
No,
like,
I can't.
okay. I see a few yeses here.
Oh,
So,
okay.
okay, poll closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, I am glad to see the no, to be frank, but I'm really worried to see the yes as well. So almost 63% of the people, they haven't seen it, and that's a good thing. And you really don't want to see them, like what I've shown you. It's a really problematic weed. But yeah, so definitely people have seen it. So we saw that too. So this is a picture from Roosevelt County. So we found this water hemp population in durum wheat, and in this picture, that's me with Jeff Chilson. He's the MSU extension agent from Roosevelt County, and then we have Tim Seipel. So we got this report that there is a resistant population in Roosevelt County, and we went there and collected some seed, and we'll be doing further studies on this population. So definitely there is water hemp. I probably should have modified that question to see if somebody has seen Palmer or water hemp, but yeah, definitely water hemp, we have seen that. So as you have seen Palmer or water hemp, I would focus on water hemp since we saw that. What could be the resistance status of this water hemp from this biotype? And is it a susceptible? It's resistant to one group, two group, or 3 or more groups of herbicides? What's your thought about it? If you can answer that question, that'll be great.
We'll give it about 15 more seconds, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, poll closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. So there is a majority of people that think that it's resistant to 3 or more groups of herbicide, and there is definitely 21% of people who think that it's susceptible. Well, there is no straight answer to this question. It's more like, kind of a speculation without doing any testing. But, to really answer this question, we need to come back to the slide we have. So there is a high chance that we are getting, some of the species from our neighbors. And if you can look at North Dakota and South Dakota, they definitely have resistance to group 9, that's glyphosate. And so I would say that it definitely has resistance to at least one group of herbicide, but you never know if there is some, you're hiring some custom harvest equipment or something like that from Midwest, and you may end up with the resistance to more groups of herbicides. So anything is actually possible. There is no correct or wrong answer to that question, but I just wanted to see how, to trigger that thought and see what you think about it. And it's highly likely to be resistant to glyphosate. Not sure if it could be susceptible, because I struggled with finding a susceptible population when I was working on it. But we'll see. We'll do some tests on that. Okay, so I want to talk about management of these two species, if you get it, or what we should be doing. So when we start thinking about management, we always think about, we should integrate multiple weed control tactics into a weed management program. So looking at not just chemicals, but also looking at cultural, mechanical, and biological practices. But that's when you get that problem. But before even that, you should target for prevention. You really don't want that weed in your field, and you really don't want to manage it. So prevention is the key of managing these weeds or any other weeds which is not established. So with prevention, what you want to do is you want to limit that seed introduction initially. But if it is introduced, you want to limit that seed production in your field, and also limiting the dispersal into other different fields. So that's basically what prevention is about. You want to limit that introduction. If it is introduced, you want to limit the production of the seed. And if it is producing seed, you want to limit that to that section or to that field, that you don't take it to another field. So that's the key for especially these weeds, since they have not established over here. So what do you need? So you really want to be aware of the sources that could introduce these weeds to your farm. And you need to improve your weed identification skills. And I think Tim did a great job today of, explaining what are the differences, how you can spot this weed, or you can differentiate it from the other native species which are already there. And you really want to definitely do more scouting out to see, what's out there and how your treatments are working. So prevention is definitely the key over here. So thinking about the weed-free inputs, what you want to think about is you want to use clean seed, and you want to use even for a cash crop or even for a cover crop. Prefer a certified seed since it's cleaned, but try to use clean seed. This example for Palmer, which was found actually in millet seed this summer in Custer County. Most of the seed was actually not sold after the confirmation that it had Palmer, but I think there were some farmers who used that seed, and those fields are being monitored. So try to see which seed source you are using. Try to use a clean seed, and farmers do use, in some cases, bin run wheat. It's not highly recommended, but if you really want to use it, you should think of harvest that seed only from a really clean field, so that you don't get the seed which is infested with weeds, or if you're getting it from somewhere, they may have these populations over there. This is not just for the Palmer or Waterhemp, but it's kind of in general for other weed species as well. Definitely physically clean your combine. If you're especially getting it from other states, that equipment, definitely clean that before you start that operation in your field. Harvest a small area separately, and first to ensure the combine is clean, so that you're not spreading out your seeds throughout your field. Definitely clean your seed and bins to remove any foreign matter so that you're not spreading the wheat seed to your farm by your own hands. I see a lot of people maybe using manure over here, a lot of cattle around this area as well. So composting manure that reduces the viability of wheat seeds and thus minimizes wheat seed inputs into the seed bank. So definitely use the recomposted ones. So another source which could actually introduce some weeds is which we may not think of as bird feed mixes. We use that sometimes for feeding birds, but it's like a very unlikely place. You might be thinking that you may get some weeds. So this is a study from Missouri where they found that different mixes which had one of these components, and they looked at different species. I've listed kochia, common ragweed, and pigweeds over here, and they found a lot of weed seeds which were present in those bird feed mixes, and which you may use for other purposes, but that'll actually help these species to propagate. So in the study, there were like 98 separate commercial available bird seed mixes, and they were examined for presence of weed seed. And pigweeds are present in 94 of 98 bags of bird feed. Palmer amaranth was present in 27 of 98 mixes. So these can be a source if you have, use them somewhere around, and that'll let these species to establish in the state. Pigweed species which were present were, Waterhemp, Palmer, redwood pigweeds, mostly everything, and there were many other different weeds as well. I just don't want to go over all of them. So at least 5 mixes contained Waterhemp and Palmer amaranth that were resistant to glyphosate. So you can see the severity of the problem that most of these populations are resistant to glyphosate. So you need to really think of all the sources from where you can introduce the seed into your farm or into the state as well. So need to be thinking very broadly. So this will be our problem actually, our equipment. So equipment actually carries a lot of weeds around, especially the combines that harvest. They can spread the seed from, if you have a patch and you just harvest it through, it could just take all that seed and spread out through your field. So, but the problem over here for us is any equipment which is coming out of state as well, especially if you're using some custom harvesting. So you really need to think of, if you're getting some of that equipment, if you're buying some of that equipment or using it from out of state, you need to think of, you need to clean that equipment because it has probably worked in all those fields in the Midwest or some in the northern states where you have these weeds, and that could actually bring that seed into your farm. So you need to think of cleaning that equipment before you start using it, especially if you're getting it from out of state. In case of Palmer and Waterhemp, for any other weed species also, you should clean your equipment before you start using it, because it'll help you to control or the spread or the dispersal of any weed species. So prevention is definitely the key. You really don't want that weed species in your farm, but like the picture I showed you, or that Palmer case I talked about, if you end up having it, so you have to have a plan to what you can do now, because you did your due diligence, but you ended with the problem. So I have this 5-point plan, which is really focused on what you can really do for Palmer and Waterhemp control. So before first key points I would like you to consider. So for control of Palmer and Waterhemp, it shouldn't be less than 100%. And that's probably a very bold statement, but these are the zero tolerance weeds. They produce a lot of seed. Even a few plants setting seed can cause a profound negative impacts on the field. And especially since they are not established in the state, you want to really control them like 100%. You don't want to leave any plant, because one plant, it can produce millions of seed, 500,000, I would say. One more point. So the annual herbicide costs will at least double if Palmer or Waterhemp get established in the state, because now you must use 2-pass systems, if not more. So you definitely need to think about, how your costs will rapidly increase if you don't pay attention to, if you are having these problems in your farm. So rotation of crops and herbicides, they remain most important tactics for control of Waterhemp and Palmer Amaranth, and definitely other weeds, because it provides you different chemistries, it provides you different selection pressures. So they are definitely the important tactics you should keep in mind, and also consider all the practices that enhance any competitiveness of the crop. Row spacing, planting population, planting dates, etc. And use mechanical practices as where feasible, especially tillage. It's quite effective in these for this pigweed. So let's look at the 5-point plan, which I think will be helpful. So first of all, start clean, and I'm going to elaborate on these in the next slides. So start clean when you're starting if you have this problem, or even for any other weed or any weed managed program, you should always start clean. Definitely use the pre-emergent herbicides and use effective pre-residual herbicides at planting, because the emergence pattern of Waterhemp and Palmer is that it keeps on germinating over the season. So what happens is if you don't have a residual in there, you will have a big problem in there. And when you have a pre-residual program, treat escapes, which are you were not able to control or germinated later after the residual effect was not there anymore, and try to spray them at 3 to 4 inches with any post-emergent herbicide. And if you see that your population has a long emergence timing, you can use a residual herbicide at that time as well. And later manage the seed bank later in the season. I'll talk more about it. And definitely isolate. Since there is no isolated fields, will be a great tool to eradicate or control this population at your farm. So let's start with the first one. Start clean. So make sure all the Palmer or Waterhemp, if you have, is killed before the planting. So you really don't want them to be in the field. Spray a herbicide. Use that most of the Palmer and Waterhemp will be resistant to glyphosate. So use alternative herbicides. 2,4-D Sharp, they're good herbicides in burn down applications for no-till fields. Tillage can be an effective tool to kill emerged Palmer and Waterhemp plants. In till fields, ensure that the pre-plant tillage completely kills all the established weeds. And if you look at the Palmer or the pigweed seeds, they're really small. So if you use tillage, they can be buried in the soil. That will actually help you to control them, because now they can't really emerge, because they don't have that much of energy to come out of that depth. So that has been a really effective tool for managing this weed in other states. Second one, use a 3D emergent. I think I'm running out of time. So definitely use due to rapid growth. So Palmer and Waterhemp rapidly grow, and so effective pre-herbicides with residuals can be effective. Residuals do provide benefits because of the prolonged emergence pattern. They reduce the number of weeds present and provide a crop a head start and allow the wider window for timely post applications. A couple of herbicides, I'm not going to go into them, but definitely try to use diversity of herbicide groups, at least 2 effective modes of action at full rates. So treat escapes. Now you have a pre-emergent, now you want to treat them, whatever has escaped. It's hard to know say without knowing, so you probably need to scout. That'll help you to evaluate the treatment was effective, and determine if its follow-up is necessary, and you can spot that emerging problems. And scout and use timely post applications with residuals. And since I talked about this, try to treat them at 3 to 4 inches, because if they are bigger than that, the control will be unsatisfactory. So definitely manage the seed bank later in the season. They produce a lot of seed without any competition, and they can even emerge later in the season. So the key of managing is them to minimize the number of seeds produced each year. So destroy any late germinating plants in harvested fields. You can use spot spraying or tillage. Physically pull them back or remove the plants of newly infested weeds. Consider destroying part of the crop if palmer and water hemp is only in one section and have not produced viable seeds. So that could be one option. This was one slide which I wanted to say, but so there's this patch where one plant kind of escaped, and the next season with the combine, when they went through, they kind of spread out in the whole field. So that was a good example. I think this one probably will be easier to follow. So like over here, we have one plant. So pulling one plant can save headaches later. So you can see there's a patch in the second year, and by the third and the fourth year, because it was not controlled, now you have the whole field kind of jammed up. So you really need to think about one is too many. So zero tolerance for these weeds, and since it has not established. So the last one, from my experience in Midwest, water hemp is mostly spread by combine. Seed can move easily with other carriers as well. So be careful while using equipment. I think I touched on those. And definitely cleaning that equipment between farms. That'll be a leaf blower or a high pressure air can be useful. Some harvest considerations. So if you are moving between the fields, clean the combine before leaving and harvest clean fields first and weedy fields last. And if you are within the field, weed-free areas, they can be harvested first so that you're not spreading that patch into the other clean portion of the field. And then you can harvest the weedy areas at last. So to summarize, prevention is definitely the key, and start clean, use effective pre-residual herbicides at planting. Scouting will help. Timing of application, apply that 3 to 4 inches of the size of these weeds, and the rate of application, use full rates. Lower rates tend to stack those genes for resistance. Definitely use residuals, and if there are any manage the seed bank later in the season. If you see the escapes, you probably go and pull them out, and some isolation tactics will be helpful. I think that's it, and thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, I'm not sure if I have time.
Great, great. Thank you, Lovreet. Thank you, Tim. We do have a couple questions, and I know some of you might have to leave by 2. So I'll just say now, if you need to take off, please enter your name and license number in the chat box one final time if you want that applicator credit. And then if it's okay with Tim and Lovreet, we can stay a few extra minutes and answer some of the questions if you guys are up for that. Great. Okay. Well, one question, and I think this is a great question. Thinking about that one plant that Lovreet just showed us is, zero tolerance. Becky asks, I see that Palmer Amaranth is in states surrounding us. Do we know how close it is to Montana, as in estimated miles, like in either the Dakotas or I think Wyoming? It was shown that it's been reported in Wyoming. Either one of you.
I know it from southeastern Wyoming. It was documented in southeastern Wyoming. I'm not sure how far it's made it up the sort of towards the Powell area or anything like that, but southeastern Wyoming. In North Dakota, they've identified Palmer Amaranth in 4 counties in central Wyoming, or central North Dakota. So I would guess a couple hundred miles, from 100, 200 miles from the Montana border there towards the southeast, so to Ekalaka or Alzada or something like that. Water hemp is more widespread, especially North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and then we've had that identified once in Montana.
Okay. So
Thank you.
Close enough. Lovreet, you mentioned, you showed us the results of that interesting study about seeds and weed seeds and bird seed. Do you know, this is a question I think is coming in from Pam in Carbon County, would there be weed seeds listed in bird seed ingredients? Kind of like when I'm thinking about, like when you buy seed that you plan on planting, You know, it has to list weedy species in there. What do you know about bird seed labels?
From what I know, when I purchased them, I didn't see any weed seeds. It was a contaminant, which, since it was probably under the radar or something like that, that's why it was interesting to see, how much weed seed is present and people really don't know, and they are spreading it by themselves because they're just trying to feed the birds. But, that helps in that introduction and infestation. And I don't think that they are labeled on there.
Yeah,
So for the
I've never
federal
seen that
Seed
either.
Act- Yeah, for the Federal Seed Act. So if you buy agricultural seed, vegetable seeds, those sorts of things, they have to list the contaminants on there. And they say either monoecious pigweeds on your seed or dioecious pigweeds. So that was kind of why I hit that point a little bit. If you see dioecious pigweeds on the contaminant label of your millet seed, for example, you really want to make sure that you know that's probably water hemp or Palmer amaranth that's in there. And
Yeah.
last year we to the state's not seed list, noxious weed seed list, I think of exactly what it's called, but Palmer amaranth was added to non-allowable seed contaminants in the state of Montana. But I don't know about birdseed, actually. I don't know if they have to follow the same rules as
Yeah,
federal seed
from
act.
I can remember, it is like in 2017 when I was collaborating on that study which I showed you with Kansas State. And I would just go around Kansas and to every other Walmart or any other store, hardware store, where I could find birdseed. I would grab a couple of bags and I'll bring back because we were trying to do the study and see how it is prevalent. And, I don't remember seeing anything they said about the weed seeds in there.
Yeah, I've never seen that on bird seed. We have a couple more questions here. From Triss, would you need to avoid fallow if you had a field with these plants identified?
I think, well, when you're going into fallow, you definitely have a lot more choices to control those weeds than in the crop, because now if you have a crop, you have limited choices with the herbicides as well. You can control maybe if you're growing wheat or you're growing any other peas or beans or maybe sugar beets, you are limited in the number of herbicides you can apply. But I think if you're going into fallow, you can really hit them hard because if you have something in the field, you can definitely go after them. I think it'll be good to include a fallow and just concentrate on controlling these because you can spot them easily as well or properly as well. I'm not sure
Okay.
what, Tim, what do you think about it?
I think I would probably avoid pulse crops or mustard crops when I think about that, because as you said, Lovreet, there are fewer choices and especially fewer in-crop herbicide choices. You could
Yeah.
probably plant a cereal and still have a good number of herbicides available to control those species.
Yeah, I think I think about their concern is like, if you have no competition, they don't want to send million seeds.
Yeah.
That's like another angle to think about it as well, because, if you don't have anything in there, you don't have any competition anymore. But, it definitely gives us other options. So it's, I think the way you look at it, I guess.
Another question someone had is burning a viable control option for weedy pigweeds?
I can chime on that. So we've done studies on narrow windrow burning and stuff like that. So the burning does help, but the problem is if you are trying to burn a field, which doesn't have that much of biomass on it, that will not help because it will not raise that temperature to that level that will kill that seed. So basically, you need to concentrate that biomass into a narrow zone so that you get that burn and it increases that temperature to that high level, which may help. And I'm not sure about the conditions over here. It's very cold over here, and I'm 6 months old.
Yeah, and I think, if you think about Montana and, we do have some people joining like from Idaho, Washington, and Oregon with the zero tolerance approach. at least in our states, you know, probably don't want to mess around with burning. Just get that, you know, pull that plant, cut that plant, whatever you can do to make sure that you're killing it
Yeah, it
and
does.
keeping
Yeah,
the
it doesn't
seeds
allow it to set
contained.
seed. Yeah.
Yeah. Becky, do you see any other questions?
There was one other one here, Jane. You had kind of skipped over it, I think.
Was it the one about multiple resistance?
Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, that one.
Oh yeah, I think this was Clay entered a question kind of partway through your presentation, Lovreet, about so it could have multiple resistances. Like, is it fair to assume that any Palmer amaranth or water hemp that would show up in Montana, it's fair to assume it's going to be resistant to some herbicides? I think that's what Clay was getting at.
Yeah, I would say definitely. If you look at that map I showed you, you know, the neighboring states, they do have reports of at least glyphosate resistance. So, you know, there is a chance. So most of the time, let's think about this like this. So if there is a weed which is introduced, that's most likely from the other state, and that may have come, you know, arrived over here on a combine, maybe. Let's assume that, or maybe on any equipment or with any seed. So those seeds will be actually from the weed escapes from any field. So, you know, they have applied a herbicide and they were escaped, and they will end up in the grain, or they will end up in the combine. So they were resistant to some herbicide because they couldn't control it. Now it ended up in the grain, and now that combine or that seed source, they came all the way over here. So it's safe to assume that they will be resistant to at least one. And you know, multiple resistance like group 2 herbicides, they have been used for so long. So that will be the second suspect for me, the group 2 herbicides. And I'm not sure if you bring anything from Missouri or somewhere, you might get PPO as well. So it's you know, it's fair to say that, you know, they will be resistant because, you know, the susceptible you would have controlled in the initially in the season, and now you are left with the resistant ones, and you have this in the grain. So I think that's how I think, you know, that it will be resistant.
All right, Tim, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that's right. I think Lovreet and I have been looking for susceptible seed of water hemp so we have a control for our herbicide screening trials. And we'll just say it's hard to find.
You mean from people in other states?
In people in other states, yeah, just like anywhere in the Midwest, that you would say, hey, do you have any susceptible water hemp? And they kind of, the answer is no.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not a true susceptible. It'll be susceptible to one, but resistant to other. Like,
Yeah,
you know, I had multiple susceptible populations for my study as well. So,
yeah.
you know, it's
Well, I think we're going to wrap up here. I want to say thank you to Tim and Lovreet. That was really informative and really useful information. I want to encourage everybody who's still on the webinar that be looking for these weedy pigweeds, water hemp and Palmer amaranth. They're not easy to identify, as Tim pointed out. So if you see something odd growing alongside the road, I know many of you are weed coordinators and, you know, working in rights of way and natural areas and that type of thing. If you see something odd, it looks like a pigweed and you're not quite sure what it is, make sure you're reaching out to your local extension. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Lovreet and Tim. I can get you in touch with them. But let's make sure we're on the lookout for these as the field season approaches again, and do our best to have the prevention and zero tolerance that Tim and Lovreet talked about. So thanks again, you guys. When you guys sign off this webinar, those of you that are still here, you're going to get a little pop-up window, and that's where you will, if you click on that window, you'll go to an evaluation where you can give us some feedback on the presentation. So please do that. Please join us next week. We're going to have we're going to have a real tag team next week. We're going to be joined by our state weed coordinator and 3 of our county weed coordinators to talk about complying with the County Noxious Weed Control Act. So bring your questions. It'll be a good opportunity to visit with some people who are dealing with that daily. So thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.